Welcome, listeners, to episode 41 of Cocktail Hour. I'm Andy.
I'm Liz.
And we are here with special, awesome guest, Radclyffe. Woo!
Sweet.
And then give it up.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we haven't had you yet.
That was dinner.
Oh, my. The drink today is the Lone Wolf. And I know that Liz has one ready to go, and it's probably it's probably nice and cold by now.
Yeah, I even iced the glass to, make it all frosty.
Wow. All right, so tell us what...
Fancy.
Yeah, right? All right, so tell us what's in the drink.
So it's 1.5 ounces of light rum, 1/2 ounce of SoCo, Southern Comfort, 1/2 ounce of triple sec, and 1/4 ounce of lemon juice, and then a cherry on top.
All right, so take a sip. Let's see what you think.
Alrighty. Oh, dear God. I'm going to be ready tonight to go dancing.
That's awesome. Oh, God. Rad, are you enjoying any alcoholic libations this evening?
No, I'm just drinking a soda because I want to stay really on top of things for you.
Oh, you are just a flatterer. I like that. I'm having a Starbucks decaf iced something or other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
well,
know. I'm not.
You know what? I think the Lone Wolf wins.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely.
It definitely has a bite.
We had a book giveaway contest, I guess. A couple weeks ago, we had Ollie Volley on. And the question was, what was the name Azra used during her lifetime in Venice? Now, the answer to that question is Antonio de Cristo.
Wow.
Yep, Antonio de Cristo. And Cass, who is the host and owner of Xena and Uber's podcast, actually got it right, and we pulled her name out of the hat. So congratulations, Cass.
Wow, good for her. That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as a matter of fact, Cass was so excited about our show and the book giveaway, and she loved listening to Ollie Volley and her stories, because, Ollie Volley can turn a tale like nobody.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
So she actually says, "Could you think you can see if we can get Ollie on my show?" I'm like, okay, I'll see what I can do. So there you go.
I had lunch with Allie in New Orleans about a month ago, and she regaled me during a luncheon with one of her many stories.
Awesome.
I love to hear her stories.
She can tell them too. Wow.
She can.
Wow. She's awesome. But we're on to this show is about your awesomeness. So
okay.
Yeah.
Your largesse.
Yeah, your largesse. Right, exactly. I have been reading your work for a number of years, and when I pulled up Night Hunt and I started reading it, which is the third in your Preternatural series, which, wow. Okay, but we'll get on to that in a minute. But I wanted to say, in the very beginning, and I'm sure that there's some type of I don't know what the hell you call it, the author brag page. I'm not sure what it is, but it lists all of your books, and it groups them by category or theme. I mean, you've got a ton of them in romances. You've got the Honor series, the Justice series, the Provincetown Tales, First Responders novels, just scads of short fiction, and now you've got the Midnight Hunters trilogy, and it's just fabulous. I remember you did a X-Files Scully thing on on your website.
I did
several years ago, wasn't it?
It was actually quite a number of years ago. It was in the late 90s, probably 1998 and 1999. Into probably 2000. That's how I first started sharing my work. I had been writing for a long time, but I'd never really considered being published or having anyone really read what I had written. Mm-hmm. And then I started doing the fan fiction, and that's how I got into kind of writing with other people and for other people.
Nice. But you still have quite a bit online that people can look at that you haven't taken down.
Yeah, when I first started, and this was again really probably about 12 years ago, I put quite a lot of my early work online, and I thought, it's out there, and once it's out there, it's kind of out there, and I thought that there was really no reason to remove it, and I have a lot of new works that have never been put online, so I thought maybe, some people will find the work and enjoy them and read some of the other books I've published, and if not, well, then they can just enjoy what's out there.
Yeah. Nice. I like it. I think it's a really nice thing to do. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
How did you transition from being a doctor to being an author and then finally a publisher, an editor?
Well, it was a slow but really natural transition. It wasn't something that when I started out, I wasn't thinking about becoming a publisher. When I started writing, and that was actually a very long time ago, I never really even thought about being published. I just wrote because I liked writing. And then after I started getting involved online with writing groups, and I published a couple of my first early works, I started writing more, and I started publishing more, and I really enjoyed the publishing process. So after I'd been at it for about 5 or 6 years, I was really writing pretty much full-time and practicing surgery full-time. So I was really busy. I was practicing surgery all day and writing 3 or 4 hours a night and 6 or 8 hours a day on the weekends to get my work out.
Wow.
And I really wanted to start publishing, and I just couldn't do all of those things and do them well. And I was at a point in my life where I could make a decision that I was either going to stop practicing surgery or change what my plans were for publishing. And I decided that I would retire from surgery and start Bold Strokes books. So it was a cumulative thing that happened over probably 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
So I had no idea how it was going to work out. But fortunately, it's worked out really well.
That's awesome.
You've done a really phenomenal job at recognizing talent and nurturing authors and putting out the kind of authors and novels that just can't stop winning awards. They're really fantastic and varied. And even within subgenres, for example, paranormal, you'll have several different people doing vampire or wares, but each of them do it in a very new and interesting kind of way. From Winter, her series with the vampires, and the Garul series, which is very, very different than the wares that you write about in your series.
Well, I think, first and foremost, I really think that if you're going to be a good publisher, then you really need to love the work. And I love lesbian fiction, or gay fiction, I should say. Gay and lesbian fiction, I guess I should say. Because I've been reading it all my life, and it's made a huge difference in my life. So I think when you love the work, it's easy to recognize the talent. And I've been really fortunate that we've had really good authors send their work to us. And, a lot of the authors say, well, we all get along so well. How can it be that there are so many of us and we all get along and we support each other? And I think part of the reason is that who they are comes through in their work. And it's really easy to tell when people love what they're writing and love the work, and you just know that they're going to do well. So I've been fortunate that I've had really good authors send their work to me. It's all on them, really.
Mm-hmm. I like it because, I have friends on Facebook with much of your authors, and I know that you have a retreat with them, and there are also a lot of different community building exercises where you get together in Palm Springs and do skits and interact with each other, and in a very social, almost like an extended familial way. And that's one of the things that I find really attractive about Bold Strokes books, is that kind of relationship that you nurture each other, support each other, laugh with each other.
Well,
it's amazing.
It is. It's great. And again, I can't take all that much credit for it. I do think that what makes Bold Strokes maybe a little bit different is that we really want to do more than just publish books. When I started out, I had 2 goals, really. One was to publish quality gay and lesbian fiction. And the other thing was to build a place where authors could come to learn about craft, to improve their writing, to build a career, to become more successful as time went on. I really wanted to create an infrastructure for authors to come and to learn and to grow. And I think that we try to do that all the time. We read each other's works. We support each other. We spend time promoting each other. And as you mentioned, we did the retreat last year, which was really cool. Because usually when we get together, we're doing signings and we're doing readings and we're kind of out there in the public, which is great, which we really like. But I wanted to give them a place where they could come and just enjoy being authors together and talk about writing and play a little bit and not have to work so hard. So that was a great event. We had a great time. We spent a week in the mountains together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Mount Holyoke College, which is a women's college in Massachusetts, and one of the things that made it so special to go there was that feeling of community, that feeling of connection with a lot of really brilliant women who come together and really care about going, whatever their profession or whatever their passion, whether it be political or literary or philosophical. And one of the things that I've noticed and kind of compare in my brain is like a similar familial relationship that I see online, at least, with Bold Strokes. And, that's something that I like, I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm glad it comes through because I think that we try to foster that, all of us. I mean, the one thing I always say to the authors when someone wins an award, and that means, somebody else didn't win an award. But the fact is that every success, each individual's success, helps support us all. And I think that's really, really, really key for how we interact with one another and sort of the profile that we've put forward for this company, that basically our brand speaks for all of us. Mm-hmm. So I hope that it does at any rate.
Why did you decide, switching gears, why did you decide to why did you decide to use a different pen name for this particular series? For the Midnight Hunters. Yes. Well, I knew it was going to be really different than the other things that I had written, and I'd written a lot. It's not like, I had only written 4 books, and readers were just getting used to me. I think, maybe 36 books published before I decided to do a paranormal. And, readers have certain expectations of authors. They like you because they know what they're going to get. They can kind of count on what they're going to get from you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of romance readers don't particularly like paranormals, or at least a substantial portion of romance readers don't read paranormals. So I was concerned if I published this very different kind of book as Radclyffe, and my readers picked it up expecting, a Radclyffe romance, they were going to be upset or disappointed. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I was really hoping for was that I could get the readers who don't read romances, but who read paranormals, to read the book.
Nice.
So I was looking for a crossover audience, and it's been kind of slowly growing, but the series is really starting to pick up now.
So what inspired you to do this series?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I love paranormals, and I've been reading them really probably pretty steadily for at least 10 years. But there's never been very much in the gay and lesbian literature with paranormals. There's been horror, but that's mostly been from the guys. There were, a couple old naiads maybe in the 90s. There was a 2-book vampire series from Mins, I think her last name was, from Naiad, but not very much. And the more I read recently, the more I got interested in writing it, but I was really uncertain because it's hard. You have to create an entire world.
Yeah.
And in traditional romance fiction, which is what I've always written, even with historicals, you really don't have to do that. I mean, you can concentrate on the characters and the romance, and then suddenly you write a paranormal and you've got to create an entirely different universe. And I wasn't really sure I could do it. Mm. And I thought, well, I'll just try. Yeah. And I got an idea. I started with the biology, really, and that was something I was really comfortable with. And once I could build the biology of these preternatural beings, then I was a lot more comfortable. And then the rest of it, the social structure and the politics are really not very different than what they are for the gay and lesbian community. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty easy.
One of the things that blew my mind when I first read Midnight Hunt was the physiology. The in-depth, the very, the unique clitoris that has an internal and external extension that able to have penetration, even though it's not, very deep, I suppose. But it was very intense, and I was like, wow. And it was the first time in all the paranormals that I read where, like, I want to be aware or with aware. Usually I'm pretty vampire-centric because it's very seductive sheen. Yeah. But I read that, I was like, where's?
It's really funny because I really, you talked about how all of the series are different, and that's absolutely true. I mean, Winter's very sensual in her writing, and her writing is very sensual. Mm-hmm. And, Jill has the humor in her books that she does so very well and has sort of a light touch. But I wanted to write really biologically different. I thought, if these they have all these different capabilities, then they ought to be really different. And so I really wanted to make them biologically different. And I thought, well, what's a realistic extension of what their biology would be? And to me, this just made total sense. I could see it. And, there's precedent in nature, believe it or not. I mean, there are some wolf derivatives where the females actually do have large clitori, and they're capable of penetration even. Huh. And so it's not like I totally made it up, although, obviously I did. And took some heat for that, which I knew I would. But, I didn't really care.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. You kind of threw me. You must have done a lot of research.
Yeah, again, I write about the things that interest me.
Yeah.
So these are things that have been floating around in my head, and when I get ready to put a story together, the things that I've read or little, tidbits of facts here and there, I just pull them together and use them in my books.
Well, I really do like the Midnight Hunter series.
Oh, thanks.
Really do. I mean, sex explodes.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about writing paranormal is that there are no rules. Mm-hmm. I don't really have to be concerned about whether it's appropriate for, one of my characters to get aggressive in bed or get territorial or bite. It's all permissible within the structure of the world that you create. So it's really very freeing.
I would imagine
which is a lot of fun.
Sweet.
And I like to write sex, so
yeah,
I
you
like
do.
to read sex. You probably noticed that.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Rad, would you mind talking about the series, about the actual characters, and then specifically about Night Hunt?
Sure.
So that the readers can have a little, obviously we're very enmeshed in it, but I thought it would be good to give a little summary about the series and also about the book that we're reviewing this evening.
Okay. Well, there's currently 3 books. The series is called The Midnight Hunters, and there are currently 3 books. The first book was The Midnight Hunt, and the series is about preternatural beings who have lived in the shadows, who have been invisible for centuries, for millennia, really. And what makes the series different, I think, from a lot of the middle-of-the-road or common paranormal series is that my preternatural beings, my vampires and wares and fae and other creatures who are not human, are not deviant in the sense that they're not infected with a virus that makes them aware, and the vampires are not abnormal in any way. Basically, all of them are evolutionarily divergent from humans. If you can just imagine, like millennia ago, on the evolutionary tree, there was a little branch that came out, and humans went one way, and these other groups went the other way. So they have a common predecessor, which is why they all basically look like humans. but their physiology or their biology is different, making them a vampire or a were. So I start with the premise that these are normal beings, but they're different from human. And they're in the minority, and they've been feared and hunted, and because of that, they've been hiding for hundreds and hundreds of years. But they've always been there, and they've incorporated themselves into human society, but no one really knows. And the series starts when these vampires and wares and other preternatural creatures come out. They make themselves known to the human population. And obviously the parallel between being gay and lesbian is very apparent. Mm-hmm. And this series is basically about their struggle for self-determination and freedom and civil rights and that kind of thing. So that all sounds very lofty, but it's not really like that at all. Those are the things that are the background for the series. I mean, that's the kind of things that are working underneath the surface. But each of the books is actually a love story. It's the story about, the first story is the were alpha, Sylvan, who is the alpha of the wolf were clan, meets and falls in love with a human doctor. And it's their story. And each of the books in this series is conceived of as a standalone paranormal romance. So the first book is The Midnight Hunt, which is Sylvan and Drake's story. And the second book is Blood Hunt, which follows. So each of the books is related, but each of the books also focuses on a couple so that there is a complete romance arc within each book. Mm-hmm. So the first book was Sylvan and Drake's story. The second book is the vampire Jody and the human investigative reporter Becca. So that is their story. And the third book is Night Hunt, which I wrote the love story between the two wolf wares. And my readers have really been insisting I sort of like, quick, do something, because they really like these characters. And I introduced those characters, Nikki and Sophia, in the first book, and I've been kind of bringing them along slowly through the second book, and everyone was clamoring for me to do something with them, so this is their story.
Nice. It starts out
I
with
felt the same way, like reading it and reading about their interests in each other in Midnight Hunt, and then finally it coming to fruition in Night Hunt.
I almost didn't do it. I was going to hold off till book 4. I almost didn't do it, and then as I sat down to write it, I actually had written the first chapter, and I was going to make this Laura's story. And I had written the first chapter with Laura and Nikki, and I thought about where they each were in the progression of their story, and Laura was just a little too new and too fresh for me to actually bring her all the way through a romance. So I decided that I was going to string Nikki and Sophia along for another book, and then I decided they were ready. And if I didn't, somebody was going to probably kill me.
We couldn't have that. Good thing you did it.
So, and I'm glad, because it worked out really well, I think. It was fun.
It was awesome.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, just for contagion reasons, that like Sophia, one of the reasons why she'd never paired up with somebody or initiated a mating bond was because she was a science experiment, a cruel experiment where they were trying to create wares from humans. Mm-hmm. But one question that I had was, just thinking about contagion, if one of them is bitten by the other, wouldn't that already create a mixture of fluids that would, if there was something wrong with her, that it would already have infected Nikki?
Well, the thing, it's tough when you're actually creating an artificial biology, because you run up against things that you don't have any answers for because you've made up parts of it. But the way I've tried to conceive of their biology, especially the matrilineal nature of it, is that the were gene, or the were traits, are actually mitochondrial. So, and there's a basis for that in biology, in that we all have mitochondrial DNA, but the mitochondrial DNA is only inherited from the female. So if we put the were traits in the mitochondrial DNA, that's why it's only the female wares will produce wares. So then the theory is that until they mate and they get fusion of parts of their mitochondrial DNA, they might be safe. And what happens when they actually, as opposed to when they have sex, because they do bite when they have sex, but it doesn't create the emission of victus, which is basically the fluid that carries the mitochondrial DNA and the neurotransmitters that start that's how a female can impregnate another female. Until that happens, they won't have the absorption of that DNA, which presumably is abnormal.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering about that.
So it's the mating part of it, and what I hope I've been able to show is that when they mate, there's actually a chemical fusion so that they are biologically altered by their mating. And so until that happens, they're not really totally joined, which is why, they can have rough sex and Nikki can bite, her partner, but until they have that complete bonding, they don't have the chemical alteration.
Okay.
So I conceive of Sophia as a sort of like a carrier. And again, there's the parallel to to many, like Typhoid Mary, who was a carrier, but she wasn't sick. And that's kind of how I conceive of Sophia with this altered mitochondrial DNA. She doesn't have any symptoms, but she doesn't know that she won't actually transmit fever. That's what she's afraid of.
I'm thinking about. You're like, I'm going back. I'm thinking about the stories. I'm like, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I don't usually have that long to lapse.
I was pausing for you, Andy, because I realized I've been monopolizing.
Oh no! Please. We tease and say that Liz is a BSB hoe. So I figured she'd probably take over most of the show.
BSB evangelist. It's terrible.
Oh God! But we love her.
That's one of the challenges of writing a paranormal is actually keeping a consistent world as you build it. And the more you add, the more you have to make sure that all the little pieces kind of fit together. And this has been a tough one because from the very beginning, I've tried to have somewhat of a realistic biological basis, but, guess what? There aren't really vampires as far as we know. And there probably aren't any wares. So obviously some of this just has to be made up, and there's leaps of scientific faith in there.
Yeah, well, it's not like somebody can give you contradictory evidence either,
But, it's great because when I'm doing readings and everything, and people are going, yeah, but, what about when Nikki and Sophia, and, they want me to explain all the biology and the sex, and it's like, okay, I'm going to have to scramble here.
Oh, that's cute. That's awesome.
Do a little biological tap dancing.
If you take out the Midnight Hunters series and just on your romance novels, well, I know Midnight Hunters is, it has romance, romantic pairings, but of the others that are non-paranormal, which series did you find like the most challenging? I mean, I have an idea which one would be based on reading it, but
the most challenging?
Yeah.
Oh, hands down, the Justice series.
Really?
Oh God, yeah. The plotting is enough to just make me nuts. Writing intrigue or mystery is so difficult. And just making it make sense and making it believable and creating realistic villains and going through all the procedural details and making them sound like they're really cops and not stupid. And, it's really, I think, that anyone who writes mystery and intrigue and does it all the time, good for them, because I'm exhausted by the time I get done writing one of those.
Well, you could have been too damn exhausted. You got several of them under the Justice
I think
series.
there's 6, but they wore me out.
Damn.
Writing romance per se for me is not. I mean, it's not easy, but it comes really naturally. And they're mostly character driven, which is also pretty easy for me in that I really I can easily visualize characters, and most of the time I can really see their story unfold. So the plot sort of comes along as a result of the characters' interactions. Mm-hmm. But that's not true with an intrigue. With an intrigue, the plot is a very focal part of the work, and it's intertwined with the character's story, but it's not the same. So it's an entirely different element that has to be injected into the work. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot harder.
One of the things that I've noticed that I assume is something that you put in an effort for is to have characters that have physical ailments or injuries or, Dev from When Dreams Tremble had a horrible bike accident, and in the Providencetown series, I like that there are people, even though they're always really hot, and stunning specimens of human being. Like, I like that there are differently abled people, that they have, limitations and vulnerabilities. And sometimes I feel that the sexier parts of some characters, especially the strong ones, are their actual vulnerabilities, that their weaknesses, their things that they're uncertain about, or the parts of themselves that they rarely share.
Well, I think that whether it's physical or emotional, and I think in most cases the emotional vulnerabilities are even more telling, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's what we as romance readers resonate to, are the vulnerabilities of the very strong characters. Because that's what we fall in love with. I mean, that's why we fall in love with them. I mean, we want to go to bed with them because they're hot and sexy and confident, but we want to fall in love with them because they need us, and they need healing, for example. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know. I mean, I write big characters. I know that. I mean, I always have. That's what I like to read about. I like to write heroic characters. So I write, big, I don't mean physically big, I mean big in every sense of the word, characters, archetypal characters. But I think to humanize them, they have to have weaknesses and flaws, and sometimes they're physical. But I don't think of the physical ailments, like Graham was blind. Vance in Promising Hearts had lost her arm. If anything, that makes them stronger and grander in my vision. And
absolutely.
It's the internal vulnerabilities. Graham's fear of her own passion that makes them, at least in my eyes, compelling. And I think that's what makes a great romantic hero. I'm actually I'm teaching an online class, like right now, you can probably tell, on writing the lesbian hero. I've been teaching it for the last week, so it's really on my mind.
Sweet. Hey, we don't mind. It's interesting, actually. So, what's on the horizon for you? I mean, you've really, as we've talked about, you've written quite a bit. You formed Bold Strokes, and you did essentially lesbian work, offering lesbian work, and now you've I don't know, how long ago is it? 2 years now that you've been offering gay stories too?
I think probably just about 2.5, and we're really, kind of growing that part, and we're doing YA, which I'm pretty sure you know, and we're bringing out now almost one a month young adult works, so that's really coming along well. And I think in terms of the general profile of the company, I'm starting to do a few more novellas, which we've not done any of to date, but now we have 2 scheduled. Those shorter works, which I think that we can bring out faster. One we're just bringing out in ebook, and the other we're bringing out in ebook and print, but we're going to be able to bring those out faster, I think. So that's kind of exciting, to bring out shorter works that, we can get into market quickly. For me personally, I'm pretty much going to keep doing what I've been doing. I have another book coming out this fall, which is going to be a standalone medical romance, Crossroads. And for next year, we'll do another in the Midnight Hunters series, The Lone Hunt. will be out in March. Right now I'm planning it for March. And I haven't thought about what I'm going to do after that for next year. Probably maybe another in the Provincetown Tales. I'm not sure yet, though.
What inspires you? I mean, what different... I have a friend that says that she writes whenever she's on vacation or visiting somewhere, work, regardless of whatever it is. But she'll be in an environment that's different from her own, and she'll start thinking of these stories. Like she'll see people and start thinking about it, and before you know it, she's built this whole story that she just can't wait to sit down and write. I mean, what inspires you to write?
It's usually not a place, although once in a while it is. I remember when I was in New York City and I first saw Gramercy Park, which you probably know it. It's just this little tiny gated park in the middle of Manhattan. And I thought how unique that was to be surrounded by all these apartment buildings. And there was this little beautiful park, and you had to have a key to get into it. And it fascinated me, and that's why I put Blair's apartment overlooking that park, because it made me think of Blair so much when I saw that. But usually it's not a place that inspires me. Usually it's something that I've read about, something in the news. Like right now I'm writing I finally finished Oath of Honor, and I'm just finishing up the edits, and it'll be going to press really fast. And that's the one that's coming out in July. And there's a particular storyline in it that I read an article in the news like a month ago. Well, no, now it would probably be 4 or 5 months ago. And I thought it's something biological, and I don't want to tell you because it'll give away a little bit of the story.
I
read this and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I can put that in a book. And that's, usually how I get my ideas is things that I've read in the news that interest me, and I'll read a little bit about it, and then I'll think this would make an interesting piece to put in a book. And I kind of get my plots that way. But the characters, I like to write about characters in conflict, and I always start out with 2 characters who are in opposition in some way. And that's how I construct my works. I start with 2 people, and I always have. I thought, I wonder what it'd be like for a Secret Service agent to fall in love with, the person she's supposed to protect. And that's where Above All Honor came from.
Yeah, I like the Above Honor. I like that one. Yeah, the Honor series.
Yeah, that's I like it too, and it's one of my most popular series. It is my most popular series.
I can believe it.
Yeah. Provincetown Tales are a close second, but I think the Honor series beats it out a little bit.
Liz, you want to step in?
Yes, of course. What I was wondering is, you have several series that just keep on going, and you have your responsibilities as an editor and publisher, and now you're teaching a class, and when do you sleep?
Well,
how do you really have balls in the air? Because the series, there are several in a row, and you just keep on banging them out, and how do you manage to keep them in your brain,
Well, I'm really lucky because I tend to be naturally really efficient, so that's one really good thing. I mean, I come by it naturally, and I can't take any credit for it unless I, genetically, I guess I got it from my parents, but I'm really able to focus. So I can work pretty efficiently, so that's a really good thing. And I'm really lucky that I like my work, for the most part. There are days when I moan about it, but in general, I love to write. And, writing is hard work. I mean, you'll hear people say, oh, my muse spoke to me in the night, and I got up and I wrote this, and I want to say, oh, baloney, because writing is really hard. Maybe the inspiration came from your muse in the night, but writing it down on paper and getting it to look good is just damn hard work. But I like it, and I love to see the end result. If I get a sentence and it's a pretty sentence when I'm done, it's a really nice feeling. So I don't mind working, but I do work a little bit every day on the business, and I write almost every day of the year.
Wow.
I take about 2 weeks off between books when I'm not actively writing. But I'm usually, like, between Oath of Honor, which I'm finishing now, and Crossroads, that I'm starting in May, I'm editing Best Lesbian Romance. So, I do my intensive editing. I schedule them in between. And if I'm doing editing an anthology like Women of the Dark Streets, which came out in February, which was our paranormal anthology, those I'll just do a story at a time when I'm in between chapters on one of the books. But, I pretty much am working away on it every day.
Wow. My hat's off to you. Wow.
Well, makes me happy, so that's a good thing.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Good thing you love it.
So one of the books that a friend of mine and myself love very much is Shadowland. And years ago, I had written you an email as a fan, and you said that you got a lot of flame for writing the novel. And I just thought it was a unique snapshot into the lifestyle of somebody who's into BDSM in a way that's not simply titillating for its sake of titillation. And of course there's sex and there's intensity, but they were really well fleshed out characters to the point where, you get into it and you want to read it again, as opposed to something that is, more fast food approach to erotica.
Well, when I wrote that book, it never even occurred to me. Well, of course, when I wrote that book, I never thought it would be published. It wasn't something I had written with being published in mind. I wasn't being published at the time. I wasn't trying to be published. I wrote it because I was fascinated by the concept of power in relationships, and I still am. I mean, The Midnight Hunters is all about power. Mm-hmm. And, if you like Shadowland, I'm not surprised you like The Midnight Hunters, because it's just a different way of looking at all of these power dynamics. And I wrote Shadowland, and it never occurred to me that it would be controversial. For me, I was just exploring how women could fall in love and express that love physically in a power dynamic like BDSM. And when it was published, I got a lot of critical emails that it was misrepresenting lesbian sex, and women who read that. Literally, someone wrote to me and said, any lesbian who reads this book will never read another book of lesbian fiction.
Oh my God.
That's crap.
To God. And that much power, And now, I think Shadowland is pretty damn tame compared to, what you read now in lesbian erotica. And when I wrote it, it was written as a love story, just like everything else I write. And if you read that book and didn't think about the sex that was in it, it's a classic romance in the way it's structured and the conflict that arises between the characters. It does have the additional element, obviously, of the power dynamic in the sex. But other than that, it's just an erotic love story. Mm-hmm. So, and
another recent book, Leslie Gowan's The Collector.
Yeah.
And I read it, and it was the first time, that I've ever had respect for a bottom. Not that being a bottom is a bad thing, but that it was this amazing quality, and that, it was something where they pushed their limits, and I was like, this is really cool. Even though it's not, how I identify or how I deal with power, I was like, this is amazing. This submissive is phenomenal and really something admirable,
Yeah, I was really happy that she kept that, and I was really pleased to see it. It's really well written to begin with. It's a very honest portrayal of these issues. It's not the least bit apologetic in any way, which I think is really important. And it's very seductive. The tone of the work, the characters themselves, the writing, it's all of a piece. It's a very nice work. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I love it.
Whenever, people ask me all the time to recommend books for them, and basically Shadowland and The Collectors are on the top of my list for that particular genre.
It's cool.
Sweet. The other thing that I really dug about another book of yours, Night Call, was that the two love interests are different incarnations of Butch, and that's not very common. Actually, there's a strong Butch-femme dynamic, and one of the things that I found really poignant about Tristan's character is even though she's beautiful and attractive and, has many special friends, lovers, she never thought of herself of ever being something more than just that. She never thought of herself being anything more than pleasing in that way. And, it's one of those little heartbreaks when Jet finally cues into the fact that she had kind of given up on being special. And when Jet tells her that she loves her, she's like thrown for a loop.
Mm-hmm. Well, some readers, and you're going to laugh when I say this, but some readers say that they don't see the Butch-femme dynamics in my work.
What?
Which just, I know. Okay. See, I told you were going to laugh. And a lot of people didn't like Night Call because the characters are both Butch. Lesbian sexuality is as much a spectrum as anything else in the world, and it's Butch pairings are not as common as Butch-femme pairings, but I find them really interesting, and Shadowland is too. But most of my works are more Butch-femme, but I just was in a mood, and I saw these two characters really clearly, and I really love them together. But it wasn't as popular. It is now sort of caught up in sales, but it's been maybe 2 or 3 years out. But I thought they're great together. And I think that they both are incredibly strong and incredibly vulnerable. And I'm glad you like that book, because I find those two characters really, quite beautiful together. So, but it was one of those things.
It inspired
whenever I deviate, readers get upset when you deviate from your pattern. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I understand that, I get it, but sometimes you just do because you have to.
Yeah.
So I usually notice in different authors, patterns that pop up. And for you, there were a few: military background, martial arts, medicine. Were 3 things that I've seen pop up in your series and your standalones. And I was wondering how, do you have a military background? Or are you into martial arts? Is that something?
Well, I don't have a military background. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be a cowboy. I wanted to be a sheriff, and I had a sheriff's badge and a 2-gun and holster until I was probably 11.
Get out.
And I like, I guess, the martial mindset. I do have my black belt in a brown belt in Aikido, and a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. So I have a lot of martial arts training. But I like, I just like the whole concept of protect and serve, I guess. And I know it's idealized, and obviously I know that not, every police officer or soldier is a good and noble person, but I like the concept a lot. And I think it probably harkens back to all the things that the classic hero types, the knight in shining armor, and the soldier who fights for, his, in quotes, country, and that sort of thing. I like the nobility of the heroic character, which is probably why I write those kinds of characters. And it lets me write a little bit of action and adventure in my books, too. So, but I have also written, one of the first books I wrote was Love's Melody Lost, and that's a pianist, and I don't know anything about playing the piano.
Yeah, I like that story.
Yeah.
It's there are a few of your novels. For financial reasons, I couldn't keep on buying more things, so I ended up rereading things that I cared about the most, and I loved that series. And the fact that she, would go into the bluff and in a very precarious walk just because that made her feel alive. I was like, oh!
That's I really. it's one of my first books, and I was very sort of naive when I wrote it. I mean, I'd never taken a writing course. I didn't know anything about writing, but I knew, I hope, I knew how to tell a story. And I love that character, and I wanted that to be a grand, sweeping romance. And, I wanted the hero on the bluff, and the solitude and the agony of being alone. And, I wanted to write a big, big romance. And so, that's Love's Melody Lost for me. And, so I do write about things I don't know anything about, and music is certainly one of them.
Well, you do so much research and you put so much heart into it. We don't know that you don't know that. I'm
glad. Yeah, I do. I'm not one of these people that spends 6 months researching a book, but I will research it as I'm writing. When I discover that I need a fact and I don't, there's something that I can't make up, because if I make it up incorrectly, then, it's going to be obvious. Then I'll look something up just as I'm writing. Mm-hmm. But I pretty much, I just write. I start with the characters and I just go, and then I'll research as I'm working if I need to.
Forgive me if I don't remember all of your work, but did you ever do a historical period piece?
I did 2 books in a series. Well, they're related, really. It's a sequel. One was Innocent Hearts and the other is Promising Hearts, and they were set in the American West in 1860. And so those are the only historical works that I've done. And Innocent Hearts was actually the first book of mine that I wrote that's been published. I have one work that I wrote prior to that that's never been published. But Innocent Hearts, chronologically, was the second full-length work that I wrote, and the first one, the earliest of my published works.
I know I must have read it. I know. Is one of them a prostitute?
That's in the second book.
That's in the second book?
Yeah, her name is May, and she's in the first book, but she's a star main character in the second book. Promising Hearts.
With someone that was...
The doctor that has lost her arm.
I did read. Yay! That was you!
Promising Hearts.
Because Anne does love her some, Wild West cowboy.
I do. Yeah. For some reason, I don't know. I'm all about the Westerns now.
Well, that's why, I always wanted to be a cowboy, and I ended up writing, one of the first things I wrote was about a young rancher, who carried a gun and got the girl. Mm-hmm.
I have to go back and read that now.
I loved that book because, it lives up to its title in that they were so pristine emotionally when it came to, they awakened each other. Mm-hmm. And their passion was so beautiful and brave and also frightening.
It was really, I was just writing about that today when I was talking about the language of love relative to the genre that you write in or the historical period. And I thought about Innocent Hearts because here were 2 young women for whom the concept of being a lesbian was not even known. They were both virgins. They had no language for what they were feeling, but they were so brave. Mm-hmm. That's what made love so pure and so strong. And that's, you don't get that past the first blush for most of us, Yeah, the very first time we might be that innocent, but then it's gone.
Yep.
So this was, kind of my way of recapturing that, I think.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm definitely going back and rereading it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. What advice do you have for a fledgling or authors that have written things over the years but never been published? How do they get published? What is your best advice? What do they do?
Well, I think number one is to have a work that you think is, pretty much as polished as you can get it. And that doesn't mean perfect. Mm-hmm. Every book gets edited and will change. But when you have a work that you think is done and you say, okay, this is what I want it to be, then what you should do is research publishers. Mm-hmm. And read the books that a company publishes. Do they publish the kind of books that you read? Do you like what they publish? Do they put out a nice book? Does it look good? Does it fall apart in your hands? Do you like their authors? As far as you know, are their authors happy? I mean, look for a reputable house that publishes what you have written. And then just go for it. And if you get rejected, if you're lucky, you might find out why, although most of the time we don't have time to send critiques when we decline a submission. But almost everyone I know has been rejected at least once, and sometimes half a dozen times before they get accepted. And it may not be because the book isn't good. It may be that the publisher isn't looking for that kind of work right now. It might be because it doesn't fit, the profile of what they publish. Maybe it requires a little more editing than they've got time to do. So then the bottom line is don't give up. Now, if you end up being rejected over and over and over and over and over again, well, then maybe there's something in the work that needs work. And at that point, I would say probably get an editor and have them look at it, or see if you can get someone with experience to look at it. So that's kind of the way I suggest approaching the whole getting published journey.
Cool. Do you think going to a writing class or a few different writing classes is really helpful?
I think it can be. What concerns me about I'm teaching an online class right now, so obviously I think they're of benefit. I had never taken a class when I started writing, and I didn't take one until I'd written probably 20 books. I have learned things that have helped me technically tell my stories in a better way. I think the most important thing is to be a good storyteller, because the bottom line, what satisfies readers is a good story. But by learning craft, you can tell the story better. So I do think that writing classes are helpful. The problem is, like all classes, they tend to be fairly dogmatic, and writing is a creative art. And you can be the best writer by the book in the whole world and tell a really boring story that nobody wants to read. So, and that's, so I think that yes, writing classes and writing courses do help. But I think you shouldn't get so caught up in the process that you forget to tell your story. I guess that would be my bottom line there.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I have actually a question about When Dreams Tremble. From a technical standpoint, I know that flashbacks can be hard to manage, and sometimes we'll pause the story, or we'll have a hard time being integrated within the novel itself. And the When Dreams Tremble keeps on traveling back to the time when Dev and Leslie were in high school, and also kind of meld with who they are at the present. And then finally, towards the end, they come together, and they're no longer caught between what had happened in the past, who they are now, and they, are able to connect. But how did you manage that without getting stuck and just keeping the forward momentum of the novel?
Well, I'm glad that you think that the momentum was good, because sometimes you can't tell how a reader's going to perceive the work. But the way I envisioned it working, and you're right, flashbacks can be very problematic, because for the most part, readers aren't interested in what happened before. They want to know what's happening now, and they want to know where the characters are going. They don't want to know where they've been, for the most part. So what I tried to do was actually create a story within a story. I wanted Dev and Leslie's story when they were young to be as compelling as the story. I didn't just want it to be about what happened back then. I wanted to make them vivid characters right in that past time, so that we could see the young Dev and the young Leslie as if it were a little mini romance inside the bigger book. And that's how I tried to tell it in real time, but put it in the past. And if you notice in the book, I didn't italicize the flashbacks. Number one, I think it's hard to read italics. I also think it immediately signals to the reader that this is a flashback, and it's probably not all that important, and I don't think readers read them with as much intent. So all I did was italicize, I think, maybe the first 5 words, and each time I went into the past, but I wrote it with the same present voice, immediate voice that I wrote the rest of the book, so that basically the reader would be in that story in that moment and not think this is the past. And I don't know if that made sense, but that was my intention. So I hope that I explained it well.
Yeah, because I know I've seen it in other novels, and oftentimes it doesn't work. Or let's say when I'm rereading something, oftentimes I'll just skip over that section.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've read it once, I've read it enough. And then I just move on to what's currently happening with the characters. I think it was Wild Abandoned by Ronica Black. Where there were a few flashes backwards, and pretty much after I read it through the first time, whenever I was rereading it, I'm like, I know what happened in that flashback. It's not that important to me. I'm more interested.
I think that's a really good point, especially because flashbacks are generally kind of a mechanism to tell the reader something in the backstory that you want them to know. And if you've read it once, you know the backstory, so you don't need to read it again. But I didn't want this to be backstory. I wanted this to be immediate. I wanted this to be as alive as the rest of the book because I loved them when they were young. I mean, it was kind of like me when I was young. I worked at that place. I played pool in that boathouse. And I knew what it was like to love a girl so much when I was, 15. And I wanted to write that story. And that's something I think we can all want to experience again.
Yeah, I actually, when I reread it, that particular novel, I read it all because, like you said, it's not this, backfill where, I need you to know this for you to understand where these characters are today. It was integral to the plot and to the characters and their development, and the novel itself would cease to make sense if you skip those parts.
Yeah, if you took that out, there would be no book, really. There'd be heart, actually, because that was the heart. I mean, that was their heart. And that's what they're trying to reclaim. That's what the whole book is about, really.
Sure. So, Andy, do you want to tell her about a game that we play every...
No. I'm terrible at this.
You don't even know what it is. Come on now. There was a similar game that was played at in Provincetown this past October. In one of your readings, I think it was.
Oh no, this is not the 3 choices, is it?
It's only one.
Okay, sure.
Yay! Okay. The game is called "Who Would You Fuck?"
Okay. I mean, like in the whole world, or
no. In your stories.
In your novels.
In your novels.
Oh,
See, there's a nice.
God.
I know there's such a variety to pick from.
Well, I mean, you can keep it specifically to Night Hunt if you like.
Yeah, you could, yeah.
Oh.
But you don't have to. If you could have, an evening with any one of your characters in real life, which one would it be?
Do you want to ponder it as Andy and I answer? Because that might work.
Well, if it's going to be the Midnight Hunters, it'd be Sylvan.
I vote for Drake.
Okay.
Which normally I do gravitate towards the butch characters, but I happen to be, I don't know if I'd call it a fetish, but I kind of like top on top or butch on butch action, and Drake never struck me as a femme.
I agree.
And I am attracted to her scrappiness, that she was able to make it through the child system and foster care and whatnot, and she was not intimidated by Sylvan in most cases from even a lizard brain level. Most people would be afraid of the predator.
Right. Well, that's the whole point. Absolutely, everybody runs when she growls. but not Drake.
Like, I don't care. I've got a job. It means a lot to me, and there's nothing you can do to get between me and my, vocation. That is as much about a part of who she is. She's like, I want to treat this. I don't want to be in the dark, and you're going to have to let me in right now. And
I think you're right. I think Nikki and Sophia is a butch femme pairing. Jody and Becca is a butch femme pairing. Sylvan and Drake, no, not so much. I think that's much, much more of a butch pairing.
And I liked that in the world that you created, that the only person more dominant than the alpha is her prima.
Uh-huh.
Which appeals to me. I even wrote a story myself about a butch on butch pairing, because you don't see it very much, and I think it's very hot to have these two tops kind of like, I'm going to take charge right now, but it'd be okay if you did, like, the next round is on you, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so much fun, because you can play with power roles. And you don't get, pilloried for it. I don't know, maybe I'm just being
I like that, pilloried.
But really, it's great because there, as I said before, there are no rules. There are no sanctions. Let's put it that way. You can do what you want because it's all valid within the social, sexual culture that you've created.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that makes it really fun.
Yeah.
I get to write Jody. The first time Becca sees Jody, she's in bed with a man and a woman. Most of the time you write that in a lesbian romance, you're going to get crucified.
Yeah.
Screech!
Flame. Mm-hmm.
Like the record gets like...
Yeah, it stops. The music stops. Yeah.
So, there's just a lot of freedom, a lot of sexual freedom in writing paranormals.
You can imagine. Okay, I'm picking Blair.
Yeah.
You got her digits?
What can you say to that except
She was like, I'm going to show you my goods and make you all a flutter. So
I know, right? She's like the quintessential woman I've ever been out with. So I got this.
I like both of honor because Cam and Blair are in it quite a bit. Blair is as feisty as ever.
I like feisty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's awesome. Rad has agreed to a book giveaway. Yay! All right, so the question is based on the Midnight Hunter series, and it is, what is the name of Francesca's bartender/blood slave at Nocturne? All right, you have 2 weeks to send me the right answer via email. Please do not post it on the forum or anywhere else. I want to give everybody a chance. Send your answer to me at cocktailhour.show@gmail.com, and you have until midnight Eastern Standard Time on May the 11th to get that over to me, and then we will announce the winner on the next show.
All your many hats that you wear, from author, editor to publisher, and we want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time, and the drink was great, too.
Conceptually, the drink was awesome.
Yeah, so you can have one after the show.
I'm ready for it.
There you go. Well, perhaps sometime in the future we can have you on again.
I would love to come back. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.